Presented by RomulusIT.com, offering remote support for common computer problems.
Recording in progress.
Did
you hear that?
I did. That's the first time I've heard that come on. That's the first time I've had that notification. Landry.Audio, listen, like, and subscribe. Today, we are speaking with heavy metal musician Dino Cazares, best known as one of the founders of Fear Factory. Their first album was released in 1992, and Dino's been good enough to give us some of his time today to talk about the band's upcoming 10th studio album, Aggression Continuum. Dino's in California, and I'm in the great city of Newcastle, Australia. So how are things on that side of the planet, Dino?
Oh, very beautiful over here right now. Nice and sunny in California. It's nice and warm. We have a holiday weekend coming up for us next week, so it's going to be like a 4-day weekend. It's going to be great.
Yeah, cool. We're just going into winter over here, but you know, I'm Canadian originally, so winter in Australia comparatively it's not that bad. But none of that.
Yeah,
a lot of the houses
very
don't have indoor
comparable
heating.
to California winter.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Cool. It's always a little bit different to talk though, because we're in Celsius, so there's always a bit of mathematics, I guess, when people are saying, oh, you know, it's 55, 60 over there, and I go, what is that? It's 10, maybe? I don't know, 15 or something.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Cool. So first of all, for anyone who follows the band, I've been a listener for just over 20 years, roughly, probably around that time point. There's been a lot of drama recently online, which includes the fact that you know, while this album is due for release shortly, it was recorded a few years back, from my understanding, and there were some issues with getting it mixed and released. So why don't we just kind of start the process there, and then we'll dive right into it.
Well, we completed a record in 2017, and Burton had turned the record into the record company, but I wasn't exactly too happy about it. But unfortunately, because of the legal litigation that was going on during the for the trademark name, you know, we had 2 ex-band members that were fighting us for the trademark name. And so because of those legalities, it kept us, you know, not being able to use a name for a good 4+ years, right? So, you know, the record pretty much just sat there in the record company's office, you know, because we couldn't do anything with it until we got past these legal issues. And so once I was able to regain the trademark ownership in 2020, I was able to go and improve some of the elements that I felt that were missing on the record. And one of those in particular was the drums, because the album originally had programmed drums. So I thought it would be best to, you know, bring in the you know, the live drums, bring in Andy Sneap to mix the album, bring in Damien Reynaud to produce the album, and have various keyboards play on the record as well, keyboardists.
Okay, cool.
Because, you know,
sorry,
go ahead. Because the nuances of these songs are what makes everything. You know what I mean? You need tension and release. When I write these songs, I always like to build up the verses as tension, and you need this release. So for me, the riffing and the drumming syncopated as one. Like you're on a battlefield, you know, like there's a lot of tension there, and between, you know, man and machine battling out in the battlefield. And then you have these beautiful melodic choruses that come in, melodic vocals that come in and like kind of like give you hope at the light, or the light at the end of the tunnel, and kind of give you hope to keep going on. And that's the beauty about, you know, writing these songs. And I think that adding the drums definitely added more of a tension and release type of human element to the record that made it even better.
Cool. There's, you know, before sort of talking into this album, you've got into a lot of material that I was hoping we can discuss today, because I said this, you know, this is my first opportunity to talk to you. I've been listening to the band for, I think, you know, I got introduced to them as a birthday gift. I think when I was in my teens and still in high school, I got Obsolete, I think in 98 or somewhere around that period. And then, you know, that was the introduction to Demanufacture and then everything else along those lines. And I finally got to see you guys around when you put out Digimortal in that time period. I think it's probably early 2000s around then. And there's quite a unique history, as you said, sort of following trademarks and guys in and out of the band. And I'd like to uncover that, because again, we only get to read effectively through music gossip sites about what's going on. So it'll be kind of interesting to know a little bit more about that. you had mentioned Burton C. Bell, who is the longtime frontman for the band, and is kind of part of this acrimony that's going through this new album. It was announced, I think, a few months ago that he said he's done with the band effectively. So
8 months ago.
8 months ago now, and he's kind of effectively tried to, at least the impression that I get online is almost kind of wash his hands associated with this and kind of say, I'm putting it down and I'm moving on to something new now. Was there any dialogue with you? Because it kind of sounds, as you said, that the album was recorded, some things were going on in the background, and this seemingly for a lot of fans like myself popped out of nowhere.
Yeah, I haven't spoke to him since probably about 2018, or maybe late 2017 is probably the last time we spoke. Yeah, he pretty much, we knew at that point that he was done. And even now, when the record's coming out, he hasn't said a peep about it, nothing. And it, all the improvements that I made on the record only benefits him and myself, it benefits everybody, actually the fans, him, myself. So we're all benefiting from this. And yeah, he hasn't said anything about the record at all.
So it's just been silent. So the announcement would have been news to you as well at the time.
Well, no, I kind of already knew behind the scenes that this was that's what was going on. I mean, how would you take it if somebody didn't talk to you for 3 years?
Well, yeah, but you tend to hear in bands, you tend to hear sort of these announcements pop up from time to time. And I guess some of the things that, I guess what was swirling around there and the other things that I had heard, as you said, it was originally recorded, it was Drum Machine. And that led you to having to take the step of looking at a GoFundMe campaign to bring the record, I guess what you're saying, kind of up to par. And I guess the question that I have from there, having been associated with the music industry now for 30 years, has it changed so drastically to the point that you need to go out and fund the release yourself? Because I mean, Fear Factory is not a small name in the metal community, so it seems like quite a step to have to lean on people and not the company. Two
things you got to understand. We were all going through a legal battle, and that is not cheap, right? It drove us to bankruptcy. Bankruptcy means you got no money. Yeah. You're broke and you got to pay people back and you don't have the money to do it. So you file for bankruptcy. 2, you depleted all your financial resources from the record company. So you can't ask them for any more money because you've already used up all the money that they gave you. So the money's gone. So the only way for me to make the improvements on the record was to reach out to the fans and start a GoFundMe campaign. That's how that happens.
And does that put you in potentially even further trouble if you, if the record company is not going to give you any more money to complete the project, and you still gotta, and you don't, I assume there's legal obligations to that as well.
It's not that they're not going to, it's that they already have, if you understand what I'm saying. We've already used all our resources from the record company. You can't, it's okay, you got to look at it this way. They can only give you so much. The record companies don't have a lot of much money anymore. So they can only give you so much, right? And once you've gotten so much money, then, and they cannot give you any more, that's just how that happens. They're like, look, we will give you permission to go ahead and add these new elements or to improve the record. Sure, we'll give you the permission to do that, but we just unfortunately have no more money to give.
Fair enough.
And that's just where I was at.
And you had mentioned earlier, you said, you've used different keyboards and things. So is Reese Fulber involved in this record at all?
Yeah, Reese Fulber played on a song called Monolith, and I want to say parts of Disruptor. But yeah, we had 4 or 5 different keyboard players on this record.
Okay. And what does that do to you? Is that just a time constraint to kind of get more session-based keyboards in on the album?
Just because everybody has a different perspective on how these songs should sound. I think the keyboards are the icing on the cake, because the keyboards can also help improve the song, help make some parts stronger. It can also control where the outcome of the song is going to be. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So having like Igor from Yes, Max Karen, he's a killer guitarist and a keyboard player. You have Giuseppe Bassi, based out of Italy. He's a great modern keyboardist. He's more futuristic type of stuff. and then you have I think that's it. Yeah. And then Damien, who is our engineer and producer, we also, both of us did some keyboard stuff on the record as well too. So I think all those different elements added more dynamics to the songs.
Cool. It's funny that you mentioned having, different keyboardists and session musicians can change the overall sound of it. In preparation for this interview, last night I was listening to some, Fear Factory facts and things that you can find online, and I hadn't realized originally you guys, your first album was supposed to be one called Concrete that was actually produced or mixed by Ross Robinson, and there seems to be again another really interesting story there that you guys were unhappy with it, which kind of led you guys up to being in the courts. Now I've still got that. I think it was kind of ended up being released as a demo around 2003, I want to say, but that in and of itself is, I mean, that's quite a big story. First record out of the gate, working with a guy like Ross Robinson at that time, who was building his name up to become, for that period of time, that the guy at Roadrunner. What was happening?
It was just a big disagreement. Ross Robinson was my friend for a long time before that. We entered into a deal with him to put out our first record called Concrete. And unfortunately, we couldn't come to an agreement on the deal. So we actually had to go to court, and a judge decided that Ross Robinson owned the recordings, the masters, as they call it, and we owned our songs. In other words, we were able to go and re-record these songs for the record that turned out to be Sullivan and Machine. And Ross Robinson got to keep the masters, but he couldn't release them without getting a release from the publishing company, because we own the songs. So he was able to sell it to Roadrunner Records way back in 2002, and Roadrunner Records decided to release it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
I wish he would have sold it to us, but I don't know. He sold it to Roadrunner Records.
And so are you guys on good terms now, or is that kind of stayed out?
Yeah. We've been on good terms for many years now, later on.
Okay. Soul of a New Machine, which I guess is considered the first major label release, excuse me. It sounds a little bit more like an industrial death metal record with a whole bunch of tinges of kind of Napalm Death scattered through it. And then by 95, you do Demanufacture. And for people of my generation, this is an absolute classic. I put it into the top 10 albums of all times. It's significantly more polished, it's tighter, and it really kind of launches what we would consider the Fear Factory sound, which is still unique in the market. What happened between those years to kind of evolve from a kind of traditional death grind band with some industrial influences into this I guess it's called industrial metal, but it's really extremely fast picking, very very thrashy, as you said. It's really backed up by the rhythm section as well.
Yeah, a lot happened in between there. We after we put out Sullivan and Machine, we ended up going on a world tour, and so we ended up getting a lot of experiences. We ended up seeing what worked live, what didn't work live. These are just things that you learn as you go along, watching other bands perform, watching how they do it, not only just live, but just as a musician. And then me, hooking up with Reese Fulber to do the remixes. Fears the Mind Killer. Him and Bill Lieb did those remixes they're from Frontline Assembly, the band Frontline Assembly, and I got to meet those guys and hook up with them and discuss on what I wanted the new remixes to sound like. And at that time, I was really into techno and rave and drum and bass and electronic music and industrial. So I wanted them to do something like that. And when they came out with Fears the Mind Killer, I realized how much our music really fit with that, how the heavy guitars and the heavy drumming and the heavy vocals, melodic vocals, all work with that electronic stuff. That was a vision that we had already during Sullivan and Machine. But the problem is that we just couldn't afford those kind of computers and samplers at that time. So when it came to doing Demanufacture, we were actually writing with keyboards. We had Reese come in during the recording of the record and add all his elements, and just the combination of the two, the two mergers just worked. You had basically the industrial thrash elements of my guitar riffs. You had the, electronic sounding, live drums from Raymond Herrera. our drums and guitars were syncopated as one. The riffs sounded like machines. Then you had Burton's beautiful melodic and heavy vocals combined. The contrast between the two really made for something special. And then you throw the keyboards on top of that added a whole new element of dynamic and tone that, some people might have not have heard it done that extreme, right? Sure, there was bands before us like God, Flesh and Ministry and Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that, and KMFDM that were sampling guitars, but nothing like that at the time. I felt that we took what those industrial forefathers had did and combined all these other elements and took it to the next level, where we almost like, to some people, we almost redefined industrial metal, what industrial metal should be like. And I still hear people doing it today, and it's a great compliment. And I like it when people can take something from our music, and maybe it might inspire them to pick up an instrument and start playing keyboards, drums, guitar, take up vocals or write songs like that, and then take it to another level. That to me is very complimenting and a part of success, that you're able to create a sound that people want to be inspired by.
And is there anything of note that you're listening to these days at the moment?
As far as what?
Oh, I guess a range of music. I mean, in my earlier question, you talked about in the early 90s how you're into listening to dance and trance. I mean, there's just a range of subgenres these days. So I'm just curious if there's anything else that you're listening to in the background, or things that you've found in the last few years.
I'll give you a throwback of, for instance, the song Martyr. It's basically a synth riff. It's like something you would hear at a rave. And so that was, when I wrote that riff, that's what I was thinking of, a synth riff. So the riff is that's why it has that thumping kind of techno bass kick drum, like that stuff. That early electronic dance shit, stuff like that, was really influential on me, and it still is, because people are out there still doing new things and adding new elements and new breakbeats, new breakdowns, and I'm not talking about metal breakdowns, I'm talking about techno breakdowns that really inspire me, that I'm able to apply this music. I've taken a lot of techno breakdowns and build-ups through my career and have applied them to all the records that I've done, all of them. I've been inspired from techno artists just as much as I've been inspired by metal artists. And that stuff still influences me today. You know what I mean? But we left such a big body of music that in some ways we can some ways be inspired by what we did in the past. But I always try to improve every record and try to go somewhere different, or try to add a new element into the record. And I think on this record, it's a very intense record. Aggression Continuum fits with the sound that you're listening to. The keyboards really kind of dictate some of the songs. Like, for instance, the first song called Recode, those keyboards are so dominant that it plays a big role in the song.
You mentioned trying to move each album and make it sound a little bit different. As I said, the period that I got into you guys was around Obsolete, but the album that sticks out to me now, sort of when I look at the entire discography of what the band has done, is Digimortal. So when I was in my teens and high school years, new metal was dominant. It was the biggest form of music on the planet at that point in time, and Digimortal sticks much more in that sort of vein, and it's got more of that kind of bouncy tone as opposed to some of the other records which sound a little bit more straightforward. I still listen to it, but it's sort of in that time period now, 20 years later, or roughly about then. What do you think about that album looking back on it?
Oh, I think it was a great album. I mean, we wanted to go to a different level in production. You know what I mean? We wanted to, take it to somewhere different. We wanted to make it a more modern record of that day and age, because at that time, technology was definitely shifting big time, right? Not only just in our day-to-day lives, but also in the recording process. So Yeah, we wanted to make a current record. That's what that was.
Yeah, cool. So around this time period, this is, I guess, where it starts getting into all the drama. So, from demanufacture,
Well,
again,
that you know of.
that I
That you
know of,
know
yeah,
of.
of course.
Yeah.
But I've
Yeah.
got you here, so I've got to ask these questions because, again, 20 years of reading Blabbermouth and getting that information kind of from that source. Like even going back, I remember when for a time period, Blabbermouth was actually a sub website for Roadrunner at the time when Roadrunner was still
Yeah.
pushing some things, and this information
Mhm.
was really big back then. So for a lot of us of that time, we know I guess the core original band of yourself, Burton, Ray, and Christian. You end up again. I'm asking you. Sometime I think around 2002, you're asked to leave, or you exit the band, and the band breaks up for a period of time initially, and then sort of regroups without your involvement. So what's happening then?
Well, a lot of tension started to come during the writing process of Digimortal because the record label wanted us to be a commercial band. They wanted to bring in outside producers to help us write these radio songs. I wasn't having it. I was against it. The other three members were for it, and so there was a kind of a battle, on that record. That was behind the scenes, right? But eventually on tour in 2002, it kind of blew up between me and Burton. We got into an argument, got into a fight. I thought we patched it up, but apparently I guess he felt if we didn't patch it up, I guess he took it differently. So he decided to quit the band in 2002. So he quit the band. Band broke up. I went on to do other things. Next thing you know, I don't know, 6 months later or so, they decided to put the band back together without me. So I was never asked to leave. It was just, I don't know how to say it, cut out of the rebranding of Fear Factory. And yeah, they put out 2 records. They put out Archetype and Transgression. I put out 5 records, 2 Assassino records, 2 Divine Heresy records, and a Roadrunner All-Stars record. So I was pretty busy. And I actually am kind of thankful that I was out of the band at the time because I wanted to be able to do all those other accomplishments. I also, once again, was able to prove that I can go and start other bands, my own bands, and be successful and do other styles. I had Brujeria, I had I had Assassino, and I had Divine Heresy, and then the Roadrunner All-Stars thing. So that's a lot of records. It's a lot of music that I put out at that time. So I was very thankful to be out of the band. Then I came back into the band in 2009.
Yes. And so this kind of leads, I'd like to talk about how you got back into the band, but also it said that kind of the latest thing is you talked about how all these debates going over, the trademark of the band. And I assume that gets into larger disputes about intellectual property. So was it effectively yourself, Burton, and Ray, who I guess were the primary trademark holders within the band that began this whole thing?
Yeah, well, it was me that actually began the whole thing. My roommate came up with the name Fear Factory, and I bought it off him. And then I cut everybody else in, Bert, Raymond, and then later on during Obsolete, I cut Christian in.
Right.
So
okay.
we were all 4 shareholders of the trademark at that time, but things took a shift later on. Agreements, disagreements, and I'm talking about I'm talking about written agreements. You know what I mean? Legal agreements, which led to these lawsuits. But at the end of the day, I was able to regain the name, full control of the trademark name, where it started, and here we are today.
And is that what was going on at that point? So you're brought back in. How did the conversation start up? Because I think, if I'm not mistaken, there's already some legal dealings taking place prior to 2009. I think this gets cleaned up to a fact, or either way, it becomes you and Burton who become the controllers of the name, which I think leads to you being involved. Because it was, again, it was something that came out of the blue for me watching what it just said. Dino's back in the band. Christian and Ray are out, and now it's you 2 driving it. So how did those things come about to reintroduce you to the band? Because that ultimately takes us up to today.
Yeah, well, me and Bert ran into each other at the show at a concert, and he asked for my phone number. I gave him my phone number. He gave me a call, and he wanted me to come back to the band. And what did I think about that? And I said, I don't know. I got to think about it. So months go by, and he said, hey, look, I want to put all four members back into the band, the classic lineup that most people know, right? And so I said, I don't know. So Bert told me he was going to come out to California because at the time he was living in Pennsylvania. Come out to California so he could talk to the other two members because he had some problems with them. This is before me coming back in the band. So he was coming down to have a meeting with them because he had some issues with them that he needed to work out, right? And one of the issues was, which he stated in Blabbermouth, that the issue was that, and I'm quoting Bert's words here, where Raymond was having an affair with Christian's wife, who was managing the band at the time. So he wasn't really happy about that. And he wanted to go address this issue before he moved further with these guys, with Raymond and Christian. And so part of the thing was he wanted them to fire her, right? Mm-hmm. And go with a different record company and have me back in the band. And so that was what was the meeting was about. Fire her, me coming back into the band, and getting a new record company. And they disagreed on all three of those things. Mm. So that was where the first lawsuit came about. Burton sued those guys in court to bring them to a negotiation table. So we all sat down, negotiated, and it negotiated that Bert and I would be the sole owners of the trademark, and those two guys would just be getting paid a percentage every month or whatever it was, right? Well, later on down the line, the other two members ended up suing us for a breach of contract because we got ripped off in Australia during the Soundwave Festival. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that. I'm trying to remember the gentleman's, but that festival ran for about 6 or 7 years before falling over again from debts. So I assume you guys were one of the bands left over from it.
Yeah. So because of that was part of the reason we got into a breach of contract lawsuit. We got sued by them for $1 million and damages, blah blah. And I had to go bankrupt because I didn't have that kind of money to pay anybody. So I went bankrupt, and then I ended up having to go to trial in my bankruptcy because Raymond and Christian were trying to say that my bankruptcy was filed fraudulently. But I beat them in court, and I was able to regain my half of the trademark. And it didn't necessarily work out for Bert that way, and his half of the trademark went up for auction.
Oh, really?
Because during his bankruptcy, it went up for auction, and so it was up. You had to bid on it. Anybody could bid on it. You could have bid on it. Your mom could have bid on it. It's like you were on eBay bidding for a pair of shoes, and I happened to be the highest bidder. And so I won. And that's how I regained the name.
So did you have to, take out loans? You're talking about bankruptcy and at the same time then going out and bidding to be able to restore the trademark under yourself?
Yes, I had to go out and take out loans for sure.
Yeah, right. Yep. Okay. Soundwave has a bit of a notorious history behind that because it's the same festival out here that ended up getting Lombardo kicked off Slayer, because prior to Slayer coming out here, he went through the same thing of sort of contract holdups and negotiation, and that's what ended up leading to Paul Bostaph coming back into the band. So it's got an interesting kind of I guess history. But as a festival, I think it ended up getting too big too quick. And as you said, I can't remember the fella's name who was run it, but I don't think he's done anything since.
I'd rather not mention his name. I know his name, but it's crazy. I can't think of another band that has gone through it, or band member that's gone through this unique situation.
Yeah.
It's been crazy. That's all I could say.
It has.
And it was, it's been very stressful. It definitely put a strain on relationships. It's that's probably one of the reasons why Bert's not here. He stated that in his departure speech. He blames the judicial system, and he blames all the other three members, which is myself, Raymond, and Christian. And he takes no responsibility, but in reality, it's all four of ours responsibility, and it's all four of our things that we had to go through. or not had to, but we went through.
Hmm.
So we all played a big part into blame of what happened here.
So in the face of that, I mean, when you're a kid or teenager, you get into a band to have fun. Is it fun for you again?
It's always been fun.
Hmm.
I mean, writing music, creating music has always been fun for me. It's an obsession for me. I obsess over tones, drums, guitars, bass, keyboards, vocals, production. I obsess over all that. And I could see sometimes where that obsession may get on the nerve of people, but like I said, I demand a certain standard of quality of music or tone or production. I demand it, you know what I mean? And so that's probably where some people have a hard time. I never took shortcuts when it comes to music. I obsess over the writing, the lyrics, all the above. So.
And I guess
that's just how it is.
For the Last of Us, then you mentioned how you and Ross are back on speaking terms. Do you have any dialogue with
It's
either?
been years. It's been years. Don't say it like it's just happened. We've been on speaking terms for. You got to realize this happened in 1991. Okay, we were on speaking terms like a couple years later. So it's not like this. We're just on speaking terms. You know what I mean? We've been on speaking terms for 25 years. So.
And sorry, what I was going to use that as a segue to is, have you been able to?
The only reason why I say that because media can take that and they could say, "Oh, Dino's on speaking terms of Ross," but it's been years.
I get that, and I'm sure that's what I've been reading for years, effectively in these posts. And
but it's just the way you say it, like it's something new now. You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
Not.
So I get that. Okay, so where I was trying to segue this to is are you on any sort of terms with either Raymond or Christian these days? Then
would you be?
Well, no, but as you said, maybe sometimes you can get over these sorts of things, because I know Raymond seemed to disappear from the scene completely. I think Christian ended up getting involved in a few other bands, but I've not heard anything, any other projects from Ray or anything beyond that.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't have the knowledge of what Ray's doing right now. I haven't spoken to him in 18 years, so I don't know. It's been a long time. Sure, we saw each other in court, but you don't speak. You got attorneys on each side, battling. It's not like you say, "Hey, good day, mate. How you doing?" It's not like, "Yeah, you want to go get a beer after we fuck each other?"
Fair enough.
No, it's not like There's nothing like that. And it still boggles my mind of the way that Burton decided to depart the band. All the drama that he caused, in this public media. It was just really uncalled for, unprofessional. He didn't need to do that. He didn't need to quit. But for whatever reason, for whatever his reasons are, those are his reasons, and those are his decisions, and that's the decision he has to live with.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. I was interested in the period. So the band, I think you've been talking about looking for a new singer, and I guess we'll get into a little bit of the touring aspects, or if that's even possible now. But one of the other things that was interesting me at the time when you came back into the fold in 2009 was that the rhythm section, Byron Stroud and Gene Hoglan ended up joining you. And I know Devin Townsend's been on record numerous times talking about how Fear Factory was a huge influence over Strapping Young Lad. And I just wanted to know if that was part of the reason how they brought in, because again, I know that sort of rhythm section from the discography of Strapping, who I was another massive fan of at the time.
Well, I believe Byron was still in the band when I was out of the band. He was on Archetype and Transgression.
That's right. Yeah.
He was in the band. He was in the live touring band at that time. So I believe that when Raymond and Christian had said no to Burton's things that he wanted to change. Sorry, picking up.
Oh no, you're right.
Wanted to change. I believe it was easy to say, "Hey, Byron, you're still in the band." So Byron was still in the band. He's like, "Well, we could bring Gene into the band," and that's how Gene got into the band. Yeah.
Okay. So now we're on to the new album. We talked about Burton's departure, how it seemed to be quite unwarranted through a media release. Where does this leave you guys now in terms of seeking out someone to fill that role for the future?
Oh, at least be in a great position, because there's so many talented people out there that I discovered. And it's like, if I want to do other projects, I'm going to have a choice of other singers to do other projects with, which is really cool, because there's a lot of females and males are just excellent for this position. But due to COVID restrictions, some of the people can actually come here with me in California, get them in the room, getting them in a jam room, jamming with the band. It's all about chemistry, see if we can get along with the person, see if we like the person, getting to know the person. It's that's probably one of the most important things now for us, right? Because there's a lot of talented people, and we chose a few people to come down. So now it's kind of like the American Idol process. They got to go
Yeah.
through each um, they got to go through each era of Fear Factory and sing these songs with us in a jam room,
Mm.
right? Then of course we got to go out and have a beer and have a good time, see if we like the person, you know.
Yeah.
The number one thing is to get somebody drunk, see how they are.
Fair enough. And so how does that affect it? I think the schedule for most bands is that you record and then you tour. That's clearly not possible in a lot of markets. Down here in Australia, we're still going through, sort of semi-lockdown as new cases pop up. Is there a plan for how you guys, try to go out and promote and sell the album?
Well, right now it's just doing, all online stuff and stuff like that. But and releasing videos and playthrough videos and stuff like that. But we're not going to tour till next year. We're going to be safe and wait till hopefully the 90% of all this passes. There's still a lot of countries going through a lot of different stuff. So, there's certain places we can't go, and there's certain places that are going to have more restrictions than others.
Mm.
So we're going to play it safe and wait till next year, and just hopefully things will change by then.
Okay. I also want to ask you, going back to that time period, you're one of the early guys that I know that was one of the adopters into the 7-string guitars. And for a couple of decades, you were associated with Ibanez, and that has only recently finished up the process, and you've moved on to a new supplier. I think it's based in Perth down here with us. So
Yeah.
just want to talk a little bit about, I guess the sound. I had the chance to speak to JF from Cataclysm, and he was talking about the extreme evolution and quality of 7-string guitars. So I guess being at the forefront of that revolution, what you think and where they were and where they are now.
Well, back in '94, I believe, was one of the first ones that came out. There was a lot of other musicians playing it. There was like a Trey from Morbid Angel. I believe the guys in Korn were playing at that time. I didn't get into it until after I recorded Demanufacture, because the guitar company Ibanez were seeking musicians to play this instrument. They were looking for musicians at that caliber to help promote this guitar, right? And so they approached me in '95, because Demanufacture definitely made a big explosion everywhere, right? And so it was getting us a lot of attention. And I tuned my 6-string guitars down to B standard, and that's exactly what the 7 strings were tuned to at that time. So they had approached me, and I instantly said, yeah. Well, it took me about a week of jamming on the guitar, and I said, yeah. But to me, I was trying to figure out a way of how to change the guitar, because it came with these passive pickups. I believe they were DiMarzio's, and the pickups, the standard stock pickups. And I noticed that, it had a neck pickup and a bridge pickup. And I noticed that when you hit the open B chord, that it sounded like other bands, like it sounded like Korn. So I was like, well, I didn't want to sound like that, because that's not how I sound. I needed an active pickup. So I was contacting EMG pickups to ask them to make a pickup that would fit this guitar. And they couldn't figure it out for a few months, until one day they called me. They said, hey, we got to figure out, but you're going to have to route your pickup hole. And I said, okay, sure. And they go, here, we're going to send you this pickup, have Ibanez route you a hole. So they sent me a pickup. They removed the bridge pickup, because I'm sorry, they removed the neck pickup because I didn't need the neck pickup. They filled that up, and they basically made me a guitar with the one pickup, but they also routed the pickup hole to fit that EMG pickup. So I was able to change the guitar, the look, the cosmetic, the sound. I was very happy about that. That was even though Steve Vai or other people may not recognize that I did that with the 7-string, I did. And so it's funny because now that pickup is like the standard size for active pickup.
Mm.
You know, a company called Fishman, Seymour Duncan, and even Lundgren pickups, and a lot of pickup companies, and a lot of guitar companies changed their configuration in a guitar because of that pickup. And a lot of people don't give me any credit for pushing for that to happen. But yeah, that's what happened. And that definitely changed the sound of my 7-string, of not wanting to sound like the new metal acts that were using it.
Yeah, fair enough. And are 7-strings fairly ubiquitous across the heavy community now? Because I think even bands like Meshuggah have moved on to 8-strings, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, Meshuggah was one of the early bands that were playing the 7-string as well. Yeah, they moved on to 8-strings a few albums back, but yeah.
Okay. 3 decades. So as I said, Soul of a New Machine is 92. I wanted to ask you about, because again, my heyday is sort of that late 90s period when Ozfest ruled the world with summer tours. Having been, in the crux of it for 3 decades, how do you think heavy metal itself has changed? Did it peak at some point? Do you find, is it healthy as an industry at the moment?
I believe that metal in general is healthy because everybody's always bringing in new different elements and combining new different things together and progressing this sound. But at the same time, even some of the older bands are even progressing and still retaining their old traditional style, but also adding new elements. And I think production wise, structure wise, and just tones and different gear, technology, where it's making it easier for people to write music across the world, not being in the same room, just a lot of things that took into factor of where the music has progressed. And I think it's very healthy. I do understand why people ask that question, because of stuff that like Gene Simmons has said, that rock is dead and stuff like that. And he's right to a certain degree, because rock is not exactly like where hip hop or commercial urban music is, because those people are making millions and millions and millions of dollars off video streams, off living lavish lifestyles, flashing their money, girls, cars, houses. That's what the 80s hair metal bands were doing back in the day. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So a lot of that's changed. A lot of metalheads are a lot more conservative, which I was really surprised that it's changed into that,
Really?
Now, oh yeah, you can't have, you think I put a video out with a girl shaking her ass and the metalhead community wouldn't fucking attack me? Of course.
Yeah. Okay.
Mastodon did that a few years back. They put a video out like that, and people were just so mad about it. A lot of metalheads have gone conservative compared to what it was back in the 80s and even parts of the 90s.
Yeah, right.
This it's almost in some ways it's just that's just how it progressed. You know what I mean? People are more aware of the Me Too type movement, and racism and sexism and all that stuff, and people take all that into consideration now.
It's interesting that you talk about it in that fashion, because I guess last time I saw Brujeria, you guys were out here a couple of years ago with Napalm Death. Trump was the president. I remember you guys were on stage.
I wasn't in the band.
Not then when they're touring, but they're still, they push these chants of fuck Donald Trump and all that, and the whole audience gets into it. So it's interesting to me that you say the metal landscape's more conservative, but this seems to be, I guess, the neoliberal landscape. So do you think that's across the board these days?
I guess that's a way of putting a word, or just trying to describe it. Yeah. Don't get me wrong. As long as it's all safe and not for reals. I mean, look at Cannibal Corpse. They get away with
everything.
Songs like fuck with a knife, and Butcher at Birch, Butcher at Birth, and they can still get away with it because it's still considered somewhat fantasy, and I guess they're kind of like the grandfathers of that. So they've been grandfathered in, you know what I mean? But nowadays you can't say a lot of things on the internet because people are going to attack you for it.
Yeah, of course.
And that's where I see the conservativeness.
Last one before we finish off today. I just wanted to ask you about, because it's the theme of your music, industrialization, robotics, government. Have you watched any of these Boston Dynamics videos about the, artificial intelligence robot dogs and stuff? I find it very terrifying that you've got these robotic monsters running around, and I wanted to see if you've seen that. Yes, I want to see if you've seen that, because it is really kind of, leading into a lot of the topics that you guys have been on about for decades.
Well, yeah, for sure. I've been watching all that stuff, and they're getting closer and closer and closer and closer. Pretty soon it's going to be, we're going to have robots among us that are going to be, patrolling the streets, walk, why not? Because if you kill a robot, it's no big deal. It's just a robot, right? It's not human. So sending in a police dog with a video scanner, walking into, somebody could be held up in a house, or some guy inside the building could have a gun. You could send in that robot dog so they could see what's going on, and boom, go and attack.
I think even your latest videos is more on the theme of like drones and war.
Correct. That's post-apocalyptic. That's after the war and blah, blah, blah. But a lot of, like for instance, Perry Farrell came out with an article today on Blabbermouth saying that AI will not take over humans, and maybe not in his lifetime, but it is definitely going towards that, the singularity process. We are getting closer and closer. We are already slaves to technology, because people can't live without their iOS devices. They can't live without their phones for a minute. You know what I mean? People take their phones in to take shits. People take their phones into showers. You know what I mean? They take their phones everywhere. They have it in their pocket, in their purse, wherever. They can't live without it. People cannot live without it, because it just became another hand, another part of our body. And because of those reasons, that we're going to be, we're not going to, it's slowly but surely going to happen. We're not even going to know. Like, it's just going to be introduced slowly and slowly and slowly, and then boom, it's here. And because of our laziness, it's going to take over. And because of our dependency on it, it's going to take over.
Fair enough.
That's my theory.
Dino, your new album it's scheduled for June now, is it? So we've got a couple weeks before it's officially released.
June 18th.
June 18th is Aggression Continuum. Thanks very much for talking to me, and thank you for, as I said, I'm sure you didn't want to rehash all this stuff, but again, I appreciate it, because I've, as you said, been on the sidelines reading these headlines for years. So I appreciate you kind of clarifying the air for me.
Yeah, I don't mind answering the questions, because this is what happened. This is the story behind the record. This is my story that's been going on, not just with the record, but for a long time, to be honest with you. And it's a very interesting story. It's very intriguing. Sure, there's a lot more details, but I know that we don't have that much time for all those details. And it's really hard to explain the legalities of all of it, because not a lot of, you have to be a lawyer to really understand some of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Even I still, to this day, I'm trying to understand all of it. And
I can't even imagine getting pinned down, not only to find a settlement, but oftentimes to be embroiled in legal fees that outdo the actual compensation that you get for some of this stuff sometimes.
Oh yeah, hell yeah. But thanks to all the fans and everybody who's came through. Thanks to all of them that made this happen. Record's coming out. You've already heard 2 songs, Disruptor and Fuel Injected Suicide Machine. The next single will be out June 11th, and it's going to be called Recode. And there will be a part 2 to the first video of Disruptor.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much again for your time, and all the best until perhaps we speak again.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it.
Cheers. This episode is brought to you by Romulus IT, offering fast, affordable remote support for common computer problems, including troubleshooting, health checks, virus removal, and software support. Visit RomulusIT.com to get your computer back on track.